Hey guys, welcome back to episode 45 of Defining Truth. We have a super interesting guest today, a Mr. Brian Ortiz. He is the Commissioner of Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention in Riverside County, but he wasn't always there. So check this story out. All right, welcome back, guys. It's been a little bit since we recorded, I think right before the election. And man, what an election that was. Talk about radically changing this country. We're going to get into that probably on another episode. But today we have a very special guest. As I mentioned, his name is Brian Ortiz. He is currently the Commissioner of Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention Program there in Riverside County. But he wasn't always there. In fact, he's got an amazing story coming up from LA County area, getting into all kinds of things. I think you guys are going to be really interested in this. So before I keep rambling on, Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, Josiah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and share with you guys.
I appreciate you coming on. I really do. You know, it takes a lot, and as we're going to get into, I know, it takes a lot of courage to just have gone through everything you went through and then end up where you are. It's an incredible story, and it really is. It's a testament to the power of God in someone's life. I mean, it's really incredible. So why don't you, before I just keep running my mouth, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now? I know it's a super long title, the Commissioner of Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention, Riverside County. So what is that? What are you doing right now?
So yeah, the Juvenile Justice Prevention Commissioner. I just got sworn in October 21st.
Awesome.
And it was a process, to say the least. It was about 3 years. Took about 3 years, but I didn't give up. I believe these kids are worth it. So what I'm doing right now is I'm attending meetings with all top county officials, from the district attorney, children's services, the probation department, public defender. And what we do is we come together to find out how we can best serve juveniles, whether they be in detention or in group homes, foster homes, how we can have them, have successful lives.
Yeah.
Training, education, and just a collaborative network of all counties, community-based organizations also, to just see these kids be successful. Wow. And not, continue the recidivism. I always get that word messed up.
Recidivism. Yeah.
The just in and out, and then even, and also, which is, started recently, to prevent, to come up with a diversion plan so that before they get into the juvenile system,
right.
We can have programs from either law enforcement or community-based organizations where they could go maybe as a chance to escape juvenile detention.
Let's touch on that real quick, because I think some of our listeners may not understand what like diversion programs are, for example, so give us an example of how that practically plays out for some of these young kids out there.
Well, a diversion program could be, a treatment program for drug and alcohol, or, like mandatory. If you do this, then you won't go here.
Right.
And, and just something where, it could be fitness related, or, anything would do with education, just something that is beneficial, and not just, hey, we're going to lock you up and there's no alternative to, you're sentenced to this life and that's all there is to it. So just give them a better opportunity.
Hence the word diversion, right? So it's like they're going to go this place, but will allow you, or the courts allow them to divert that path and say, hey, we're going to let you try something else in lieu of maybe, like you said, like just straight getting locked up. And you're right, because we've seen, or data has proven over time that the cycle of incarceration, it just amplifies itself. That's where you get all that recidivism you're talking about, where it's like you're out, you're in, you're out, you're in. So what I'm curious, like, what's going on? What kind of youth are we talking about here? What kind of situations are they in? What kind of homes are they coming from? You probably know a lot better than others that are listening, but let's just say someone's like out here, suburban life, didn't grow up on the streets, doesn't know anything about that world in general. What are you really dealing with? Like, how bad are these kids hurting?
There's a lot of different factors. Some kids come from really good homes, and some come from,
Mm,
not the best situations. Absent parents. These kids can have both parents in the home, and they're absent at the same time, and they, leave these kids, kind of like latchkey kids. They're working and spending a lot of time not focus on the kids. And,
yeah,
the kids gravitate. There's a lot of social media, influence in today. And a lot of that, the neighborhood stuff. And, it's cool to, look a certain way or be a certain way. And a lot of kids gravitate towards a lot of that belonging, because I think we all just want to fit in. And a lot of these times the kids want to fit in, and most times they end up fitting in with the wrong crowd.
mm. Yeah, that's true. How much do you think out of does you mentioned like parents or like father figures? How much do you think that plays into a lot of the kids you work with? Like a lot of dads at home, a lot of missing dads. Do you see that at all?
Yeah, most times it's an absent father. Um, you know,
Wow.
uh, and that, I can definitely relate to that. And so when I go in and talk to some of these kids, I immediately have that bond, because, even though my dad was around, he was absent. He was doing his own thing. And it's, I believe it's the father's role is to train up these kids and how they should go. And when that's absent, the kids kind of fend for themselves, and they
Yeah.
learn it from, their homeboys, or, cousins or whoever. And they just kind of get lost.
Yeah, 100%. We definitely know that. I mean, we here at the on the show we talk a lot about culture war stuff, right? And just how the culture's going and how our nation in general has really departed from God. And we talk about dads being around a lot. That's a big factor. I mean, it really has a powerful impact on a young man growing up. Same thing, daughters too. Like parents have a big responsibility to raise up those kids, like you appropriately quoted scripture, right? Raise them up in the way they should go. That's such a big deal, man. Brandon, did you have any questions on like his current commissioner status or anything?
Yeah, I mean, first I just want to say again, thanks for coming on. You are a staple in my mind at our church here in Temecula at Reliance. Like if I don't shake your hand before going into service, like I got to go back and do it again. Like it's just you, and that's really that's a testament to who you are. You make it a point. I'm not one to come up and talk to people I don't know, and you are just like. You're just right there. You're talking to everybody. You want to know everybody's name, shake everybody's hand. And so that to me says a lot about you. And so I just want to thank you for making somebody like me kind of come out of my comfort zone. So with that said, yeah, what drove you to do this? Because I mean, this is a not only a very important role, but I would have to imagine it's not easy. So what kind of led you to wanting to do this, and are there things that the program is doing now that you think you can make better, or vice versa? Just give me your thoughts on that.
Um, I believe it was, the stirring of the Holy Spirit. God was working,
Hmm.
and I didn't know, from my own, getting busted when I was a juvenile. And then when that started happening to my son, my 14 and a half year old son, is really why I started getting involved with the juvenile justice. So as a single parent, he started to go to juvenile hall. I mean, raised in a Christian home, went to a Christian school, and it didn't matter. Started hanging around the wrong crowd, and then was in juvenile hall. And so I started working with probation, like behind the scenes. They were telling me about the programs they had in there, and my son was telling me about the programs. And so stuff, I don't know. I just stuff started. Didn't start. It wasn't making sense. Like, why didn't they have certain programs? Why weren't people allowed to come in to help these kids that had records? And I was dealing with the counselors and therapists, and what did these kids have to rehabilitate them? And I started to get my mind started to get interested in it because, of course, this is my son. And then, well, not just my son, what about all these other kids too? They matter too. And so I started to find out, I contacted, the probation officials, and then found out about the Juvenile Justice Commission there's a bigger meeting called the Juvenile Justice Coordinating Council, which is, I mean, literally everybody in the county, every top county, I mean, from the sheriff's department, and like I mentioned before, district attorney, children's services. And so I started attending these meetings on Zoom. That was right after COVID. And I just started hearing, you could hear the inner workings of the county. And the main thing that would come up is that they didn't really know what to do. So they would meet, and a bunch of people, judges were on there. They had different opinions and how to help these kids, and they were getting information from different counties, how different counties were doing it in California. But then they would table it until the next meeting, and that was like every quarter. And I started to hear, like, well, wait a minute, like, I would raise my hand in these meetings as like a community member and say, hey, well, what about bringing in these people that come from these anonymous programs and sharing their stories of how they've recovered from drugs and alcohol? And Riverside County has been traditionally more a conservative county. And they say that in those meetings. And so whereas other counties like LA County and Orange County, they're more they were less stringent to allow credible messengers like myself to have input and have say and to give them ideas, because the other counties had seen that the lived experience, we could help, and we could bring to the table stuff that they have not experienced. And so I started getting involved, and then there were like subcommittees, and I signed up. Yeah, I want to know. And like I said, the driving factor was my son. And I love my son. And I can remember it's like it happened yesterday. When I went to talk about it, I get choked up. I can remember the day that he didn't come home. And then 2 days later he was in juvenile hall. And I know that is happening to parents all over, all the time. And if I can get there and help probation with programs and ideas because of my lived experience, and save one of these kids. I mean, and my thing I say all the time is in these meetings, if we can save one life, then it's all worth it, man.
100%.
And so, yeah. And so what I do is, I just kept pushing, and I, found out that, I could be one of these members. They're community members. It's volunteer, but it's actually, a sworn in position, and started applying. And, they run a background, and, like I said, Riverside County was more, a conservative county. And because I had a background, which I had expunged because of my, changed life, they still were, less, they didn't want somebody coming in and kind of ruffling the program. It was like status quo. This is how we're going to do it. And, kind of hard-nosed mentality. But, so recently that had changed. They had started saying, hey, we are going to we don't know what else to do. Let's give it a shot. And so I was denied twice, and I don't give up easy. I know, God has given me this gift to reach out and share my story and just, help one of these kids. And I submitted my application again. And well, this time I had some friends from church who were law enforcement, and they wrote some recommendation letters. And go figure, I got law enforcement friends, man. I mean, I think it's the greatest thing in the world, man. I'm telling you, like, and these brothers are I mean, I work out at the gym with an Oceanside gang sergeant. And I mean, I've known this guy for years. He's the greatest guy in the world. And I was, us as kids and in that life, we we're brainwashed to think that these guys suck, and they don't suck. And they're like, they're great dudes. And so anyway, I get happy thinking that I have friends, like, cause I never had friends. I had fake friends. And so, have these dudes, they'll write recommendation letters for me. And then they were willing to look at it, because of my life, and Credible Messenger and the probation from Orange County, said, yeah, this guy could be an asset. And by the grace of God, they said yes. And October 21st was actually sworn in to defend the Constitution, and
Wow.
by a juvenile judge. And man, it was one of the greatest days of my life.
Isn't that incredible how, like, the Lord knew exactly where he was taking you, right? All those years looking back. Now, Brandon, I want to go back into, like, kind of why he's so suited for that. Did you have anything else before?
Yeah, I had a couple follow-up questions, and I think it's kind of on that same line. So first, my question is, why do you think you got denied those 2 times? If you think there's a reason at all. And then the follow-up to that is, what other, what are the other commissioners? What is their makeup? Because to me, you would seem like the perfect person, right? And I think this isn't specific to the juvenile commission, but just sort of committees and commissions everywhere. You have a bunch of people on these committees and commissions that don't have any business being there. Whereas, you are somebody who exactly is a person that should be there. So just kind of touch on those 2 points, without getting yourself in trouble, because some of these people are your colleagues now, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And I'm, thank you. Let me say, I am blessed to be a part of, the law enforcement community, probation. And I just want to, be a part of what they're doing, because, they want to do good things. And, there's just a lot. There's a lot that they have to deal with. And Riverside County is a really big county. And, and so they have their hands full. And so, I believe, see, I'm passionate,
That's good.
yeah, I mean, like, I sometimes open my mouth when I should keep it shut, and I just, so they were allowing me to come to these meetings on Zoom. And then when we went in person, I was allowed to come to these meetings as a juvenile, justice delinquency prevention commissioner applicant. So I was in these meetings. Well, I wasn't a full commissioner, but I mean, I still wanted to ask questions. So they would have community-based organizations that wanted to come in, and they had like a nonprofit, and they wanted to bring in a program, and because they're wanting to get paid.
Yeah.
So it's a program where they'll get a proposal from the county, and they'll work out where they'll get paid, and they're so they'll have this fancy brochure, and and so and I'm looking at this thing, and I'm like, oh, okay, here's this guy, suit and tie, and he comes and he gives, his talk and why this program that he, wants to do. And so I start asking questions because, stuff doesn't, I pick up on things that maybe these other people won't, won't hear because of my lived experience. And then so I'm asking questions, and it just seemed that, they didn't really want me asking those questions. That's just what I saw. Like, they didn't want to be put on the spot. And I was kind of fronting them off probation. I was kind of just, instead of like, working with them, I was kind of like, just all out there and, kind of,
Yeah.
irritated with these guys because, there was a program to come in and he's saying he was doing 12-step program, with kids and I said, well, that sounds like Alcoholics Anonymous. But you've worded it a little different here. And I go, that's a free program. And he goes, well, and of course a division director brought this guy in and I'm like, okay, I see how this is going. And so I continued to ask questions and people are looking at me like, what do you know that we don't know? And I'm like, well, I got a question. I mean, if you got a passion to help these kids, why not do it for free? And so it's just that, me saying stuff.
I bet you they loved you in those meetings.
Oh yeah. 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 They were like, what's this guy? Where does this guy come from? Why is he here? And so and I got impatient and I was like, hey, you need to let me in here. And, I deserve to be in here. And so they continued to drag their feet for about 9 months. And what I did is I went to the board of supervisors. I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to go around you. And that was, my, I shouldn't have done that. That was wrong. I should have just waited the process. And so they didn't want somebody that was going to put them on Front Street. And I did. And so they denied me. And that happened twice. And I kind of was getting some idea, getting some information, but like, hey, you should just work with us, not against us. And I was like, hey, well, yeah, whatever. And just freight train, I'm just gonna do what I want to do. And then, God started working on my heart and said, hey, chill out. Everything's gonna be cool. And I said, all right, God, if you don't want me to be in there, I don't want to go. And then I just kind of waited, talked to a brother at church, law enforcement, and he's like, I'll write you a letter. I said, I'm gonna give it another shot. All right, God, you're doing this on my heart. Obviously, it's still there. I'm gonna do it. I'm pursue it, and I submitted it again. And this time they were willing to go into my background and as far as the other people on there on the commission, there are all of them do not have the lived experience of any of these kids. Not one.
That's what I was kind of getting at.
Yeah, not one of them. There's, a lady from education department. They have retired probation officers on that commission. And everybody, it seems like since my appointment, I guess, because of the less stringent and, state and wanting to have these programs now, they're allowing more credible messengers to come in. But before, here recently, no, there's nobody on that commission that has been incarcerated. And I'm willing to say not, done drugs or anything like that.
I think that's what makes you, and I agree with Brandon, it makes you so effective, right? Because you're closing the gap between ideas and reality, right? And I think that some of us who spent years, on the flip side, we're going to get into why you are so effective and kind of your background and your story. But those listening know I spent years in law enforcement, and I think for some of us who spent years just on the street, whether it was behind the badge or behind the cuffs, our perspective on things was totally different than 20,000 feet away up at the county level or whatever. And I agree. I don't think it's that people have bad intentions, but sometimes these concepts and ideas are lost because they don't connect with reality, right? Even working patrol, I remember spending, you're like down there in it with the families, right? When a homie gets stabbed or, someone overdoses, I'm sitting in the living room with the mom, telling them about that. These are powerful experiences that kind of shape okay, well, I can tell you what works or doesn't work. You know what I mean? Talk about recidivism, right? About hooking the same dude 5 times in a week. You know what I mean? And yet they go, they get locked up and they'll be talking about programs and this and that. And there is a big gap, which is, so to your point, I think you're so well suited for that because you're bringing the reality at the lowest level up to the top where they're making decisions and saying, hey guys, like this works, this doesn't work. Which is so important. So important. But, so for everyone listening, right, they keep hearing us allude to why you're good at this and stuff. Let's go all the way back in Brian's life. Let's go back to LA County, and where you were raised and how you ended up obtaining all these experiences. I'll just put it that way. And I do want to say too, you know, as we go through this, I want to ping you too, if you have questions kind of on the flip side, because when I started out my career in law enforcement, I started in LA County Sheriff's Department, and, you know, we all started in the jails. So I started at IRC, and, you know, if you ever been through IRC, that place is messed up. IRC, towers, right? And then eventually, you know, I'm out working patrol in a different part of the state, all this stuff. So I saw it from the other side, and I think that would be an interesting conversation between us on, like, you know, kind of like on both sides of that coin as you come through. But I digress. Let's hear it from you first. Like, I know you grew up in LA County. Let's just pick it up there. Give us the nutshell version of everything.
Okay, I got one question. So,
Yeah.
talking about, you know, working in the jails. So, do you remember the picture of John Wayne?
Yeah.
9500?
The Duke. Yeah.
Yeah, man. You know, yeah, when you said you know, the old county, man, it brought up 9500, and
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
the picture of John Wayne, and you know, the Baker to Vegas run, and all the pictures of all that,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
and
All the Marine Corps stuff in the hallways.
yeah, man, the smell of the old county. Oh gosh.
Yeah, what a place, man. So that's a good point. You brought that up. I know we throw these terms out there, but for anyone listening, especially if you're across the country, who may not know, LA County specifically, that jail is bigger than, I believe, 33 different state prison systems. It's the largest jail in the world. It's also ranked consistently year after year as one of the most violent places in the country as far as jails. Right. So this place is heavy. LA County is 4,000 plus square miles. Some of the heaviest cities, some of the most dangerous gangs in the country. There were hundreds of thousands of registered gang members in LA County. That's just one part of it. Then you have all the other units and floors, and, you know, it's this massive complex. So it is quite the process of managing a place like that. And then, you know, you get into who really runs it, and you have your CASA rules and the MAs that have people in each facility and site and all of that. So, yeah. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about as we go into this. Well, briefly, but let's go back to you first. And where did you grow up, you know, before anything went south?
So I was born in Linwood, California, and I was raised in Downey, Downey, California, and back then Downey was a great town.
Yeah.
You know, you know, had two parents. I mean, they you know, were good people. They just didn't do life very well. They were just a little dysfunctional, not emotionally available, and you know, a lot of chaos, a lot of violence, and you know, from my dad. And you know, my mom and dad had 8 separations in 16 years. And so yeah, you know, we saw a lot of we didn't see what a family really was supposed to be like. I actually, you know, our next door neighbor, I never wanted to be home. I wanted to be at the neighbors, because that was more of a family environment. And so, yeah, you know, grew up in Downey, and, you know, you know, was pretty good in sports. And, you know, I grew up, you know, listening to punk rock music, man. That was what's going on back in the early 80s.
The
And,
Ramones. Who
yeah,
else were
man.
you into there? Yeah.
Man, I was into GBH, Bad Religion, and
Mm,
I mean, all these old school bands, man, Suicidal Tendencies, and
mm.
uh, uh, Exploited, and man, DRI, and Misfits, and I mean, you name it. You know, we were going to some shows, man, and
Mm.
you know, I just thought that was cool, man. You know, started finding some friends, and you know, like I said, I was good into sports, you know, but the stuff that I was experiencing at home, my dad wasn't very nice to us, and it was really really emotionally and physically abusive, and I just grew up not thinking much of myself. Um, Tried to, fit in with the jocks and the sports because I excelled at track and baseball and, I was really fast and, I was the top of the team and everything I played. And, I never really fit in with those guys. There was always something, I would see the kids, in junior high going to dances and stuff. And man, I was like, man, I wonder what that's like. Like there was, I don't know. I just grew up thinking that I was different. And
Mm.
there was something wrong with me, but there wasn't. And um, the the moment from the moment that and I like I said, I tried to, fit in with those guys. I didn't, and then I started, hanging around these little, you know, punker kids, and and skateboarding around town, and not going home, and and these guys were, smoking weed and drinking, and and man, from the moment I started drinking and smoking weed, man, man, I was free. I was free of
Mm.
this
That was
of
your
this
escape, huh?
yeah, I was like, man, I don't have to go home. I could feel, free of this, feeling worthless and,
Mm.
being called stupid and all this other stuff. And I finally connected to something. And man, I tried to never go home.
Mm.
And started getting kicked out of school, in ninth grade and went to a continuation school. By this time, I, started smoking, weed and drinking and, started doing hard drugs and, smoking PCP. Back then, PCP,
Yeah.
was big, some of my friends. And, ended up getting busted for the first time at continuation school, smoking PCP.
How old were
And,
you around this time when you were at continuation? This is like
um,
high school age?
15, yeah, 14 and a half, 15.
Doing sherms at 14, 15 years old?
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah, and yeah, some buddies, had a spot in Compton, and we were going and getting, 10 pours. I don't know, 10 pour. People don't
Yeah.
know what a 10 pour is, but it's like a little glass vial,
Yeah.
with PCP in it, and so these kids were in the bathroom. Everybody's smoking cigarettes back then, and
Mm-hmm.
we come in there, me and this friend of mine, and we're lighting a dipper, and it was
Mm-hmm.
just like
Sure.
a piece
Mm-hmm.
filled cigarette, and yeah, and then we get all whacked out, and then the cops come and take us to jail.
Yeah.
um, and so yeah, I remember my dad, kicking my, had to go to court. That started my process of getting in trouble.
Wow. So you really wasn't like, you weren't really into the gang thing around that time. You were more like partying, music, using dope. Like that was your scene. Because there were, I mean, Compton, there's a lot of gangs in Compton, did you ever cross over with them or not really? It was more like just on the getting drug side, right? I mean, which they controlled some of that, but
Yeah, yeah. I started, it was weird. I started hanging around with, some like skateboard, dudes and, punk rock dudes. And,
yeah.
then I started gravitating towards, different, friends that, were involved in gangs and hard drugs and selling drugs.
Yeah.
And, started hanging out in Southgate and Paramount and Bellflower, Long Beach. And, and I just, like I said, I'm always wanting to fit in, and so, these, hanging out with these guys, they made me feel, a part of, and man, I was willing to do, whatever, to be a part of that because I never felt a part of any family or anything.
Mm. I can tell you just real quick before, because I want you to keep going, but on the flip side of that, I remember working patrol and dealing with a lot of kids that age, 13, 14 years old. I think it was one of the hardest things that cops have to do is when you deal with kids around that age and then you end up, at some point bringing them home or interacting with family life and you walk into those houses and you're like, this is not a good place for this kid, but there's nothing you can do, it's a hard pill to swallow, and then we watch them. A couple years later, they're, those who do go into gangs or start carrying pieces and shooting and stabbing kids at school. And you watch this destruction. You want to help them, but it's like, the state and the system is set up so where it's like you have to take the kids back to that abusive dad or mom, where half the time it's the same life inside that house. The older brother's locked up. You know how it is. If you could pause for a minute, and you could go back in time, what would you tell 14-year-old Brian right around that time? Like maybe, when you started using heavier drugs or whatever, like if someone could have come along, whether it was a cop or a parent or a friend, what would be your message? Because there's a lot of kids that are right now living that experience right now still. You know what I mean? What would you tell them?
Well, from, a Christian side, I would tell them that, God has a plan for your life and this isn't it. And, these people are not your friends. And if you just, focus on education and, and to, the fear for me, it was fear. It was, I was afraid of everything. And, that, there are people out there and friends, and you can be, part of a family, and you can have friends, and it's okay. And there's nothing wrong with you. You can have a successful life, and there's help out there. There's other people that care about you besides these things that you go through. If you just don't go that way.
So true. Isn't it funny how the enemy uses fear so much? That's such a thing that Satan uses to get at people, and directly countering that, the Bible's clear. It says he's not given us a spirit of fear. Jesus is the Prince of Peace. Some people who grow up are thinking like, that's a nice little sign on the wall. But for other people, that's a real deep statement that he's the Prince of Peace, the peace that passes understanding. Brandon, did you have any questions about like home life or dad or?
Yeah. I mean, what, yeah, I guess like, did you ever think that there was another option outside of the drugs? Or, I mean, because those are all decisions you have to weigh, right? Because, I also grew up in a home. I wasn't 16 until, I was 16 when my dad left, but my younger brothers were 14 and 12. And that was sort of a critical time for them. Whereas, I kind of think I was already kind of on the path that I was going to go. So it didn't affect me as much. I sort of had to, even though my brothers didn't want to hear it at the time, they probably don't want to hear it now. I had to switch my line of thinking and think like, I have to take care of my brothers. They're 14 and 12. So do you have siblings? And then was there ever a time where you're like, maybe I just need to go do more sports, or was drugs just it for you? Or what kind of like, it had to have been a battle, right? It's not like nobody wants to do drugs, as the first option. So kind of what was your line of thinking there?
Well, I had an older brother that, I guess, growing up, I started to get older and, hanging around, and he was into drugs, and going in and out of prison. And so I started growing up and seeing that. And when I started getting involved in that, I idolized the guy. I idolized the guy. And I was, I can remember, driving down the street on Rosecrans with my dad, going to my grandmother's house where we lived, and saying, I just want to go to prison like my brother. And he said, man, that's got to be the sickest thing I've ever heard in my life. And I'm like, I don't care. At some point, I decided that that's what I wanted to do. And I knew that I could, go to school and get a trade and do all these things. It was kind of like out here, and and I remember my dad, he tried. I mean, he tried his best. I mean, he just he would say, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that, but he's off doing his thing, and I'm like, yeah, cool, whatever. And it was kind of like a thing, like, yeah, maybe I should do that. Nah, this is easy. That's hard.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this. I know this. This is comfortable, and this right here is what makes me comfortable in my own skin because I never felt comfortable in my own skin. And when I was involved with those the homeboys and that lifestyle, and I just I felt comfortable, and and I betrayed myself. You know what I mean? I betrayed myself because that's not who I was growing. I didn't, to fit in. That's exactly what happened. And like I said, I idolized my brother, and he encouraged that. And he's actually the one that gave me my first piece.
Mm,
Uh, and I was, man, I was like, all right,
yeah.
and it's just, and that's what happens, these generational things with families and gangs and cousins and homeboys is that, they encourage it versus, encouraging, the other ways that they might know. They're like, well, this is easier. And yeah, they'd rather be their friend, versus like if it's a father or a son or, a family member, they'd rather be their friend than, their family member and show them the right way. And it's just, man, it's just a brainwashing since, way back when, man.
So to follow up on that, because we'll get to it, but in your bio, it sounds like your dad is actually the one that kind of led you to Christ, or at least opened that door for you later on down the line. So you clearly had a big 360. It sounds like your dad had a 360. Was your brother able to make that full 360 as well, or what's he doing right now?
Um, I don't really know. I mean, so I have two older brothers. I have one older sister. I have a younger sister, and I have a younger brother.
So you're
And
like right in the middle.
yeah, we're all disconnected. I mean, the two older brothers are from a different mom, as is the older sister. And then my younger sister and younger brother are from my mom. And I mean, my older brother is the only one I really talk to. He's out, I believe he's a Navy veteran, and he's just never, wanted to let go. I mean, he knows the Lord, and he's just, I think that, he's just, okay with continuing that lifestyle. And, it's sad, and I'll reach out from time to time, and just praying for him. And my other brother, nobody knows what happened to him. And, an older sister, she's out in Nevada. We don't speak. She lives, a gay lifestyle, and I've always been real close to her, but um, just she stays at a distance, and but I've always tried
Mm,
to be there for her no matter what, and I love her. Love the sinner, hate the sin, and but yeah, and then I got a younger brother who lives with my mom, actually on the next block over here,
mm,
who you know, couldn't put down the meth and alcohol, and 100 miles on a motorcycle and traumatic brain injury. So he's kind of like a child. He's my 85-year-old mom's taking care of him, and
mm.
um, you know, thank God that I was spared. I mean, it's only by the grace of God that I was spared from not dying or being incarcerated for the rest of my life. And
So true, huh?
so I just I live you know give people his message, and so
All right, so let's get back to the continuation school. You just start using dope, or around that time, or I think what did you say? It was the first arrest, I think, when you were there.
yeah.
Yeah. So what happened from there after that first arrest, and what was that like?
Yeah, I'd already had some friends that were going to juvenile hall and going to jail, and so I took it as a sign of like, oh, this is cool, whatever. I mean, I'm just in here, and it didn't bother me. I mean, for a little bit, I was like, man, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. You know what I mean? But that other, thing took over. It's like, no, man, hey, my friends are gonna think I'm cool, and man, I used to like a badge of honor now. Like, hey, I've been
Yeah.
busted, and it's just from the pit of hell, man.
Mm,
And so shortly after that, I'd gotten busted for an assault, and yeah, and I just it became it became normal, to be involved. And my dad actually had stepped in and convinced the juvenile, instead of sending me to Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall, had convinced the judge to actually send me out of state. And so I got sent to Utah, Provo, Utah, to like a boys,
Wow.
home,
Yeah.
in the middle of, nowhere. And I was like, okay.
So you were kind of in and out all throughout like juvenile years, different arrests or different things, right? So what happened when you became an adult?
Well, came back from Utah and just a year later, jumped right back into the same old thing. And when I became an adult, nothing changed. I mean, I didn't, I did little odd jobs, and I still had those friends, and started, like I said, started getting busted, going to the county jail in LA. And, then I really thought I arrived. I thought, man, I hit the big time now. I'm in the county. And,
Yeah.
you know, you know, uh,
Do you
when,
remember the first time you went through IRC?
oh man, I mean, it takes you like a whole entire day. It takes you a whole entire day to get processed. And
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 there's like three deputies watching 600 people. It's pretty
oh
wild,
yeah.
huh?
And there's people coming in, and it's a trip. You're sitting there in this tank with just fools from all over the place. And then you just see people continuing to come in and come in, and they're packing this room and they're packing this room. And you're like,
Yeah.
what the heck is this, man? And, it just tripped me out at first. You got people from all over the place, man. They're just coming
Yeah.
in. I'm like, wow, this is like a cattle farm for real, man. They're just coming from everywhere. But you know what? you know, your mind adjusts to that type of living and
Yeah.
and environment, and unfortunately, it becomes normal. I'm like, wow, okay, I could do this. Okay, shower. Yeah, let's go. And you have to hurry up. You get like 2 minute shower. After sitting there for 24 hours. And man, I know this is gonna sound bizarre, man, but they put you on these benches and they say nuts to butts, and
Hmm.
you butt naked. You butt naked, man, and you ride up with next to some dude, and you're like,
Yeah.
this is not normal.
It's
But
not
I'm
a
like,
fun place. Now, if you remember, just let's give a visual here for listeners. So IRC, again, LA County is huge. So you got buses rolling in and transports from all over the county, different cities. Maybe it's a PD bringing you in. It could be whatever. And they roll up. Your last glimpse of fresh air is in a covered like bus sally port. You go through these airlock, these sally port doors, and as soon as you walk in, right, that first entry area at IRC, you get that instructions. That's like, you're not going to speak, don't even look, keep your eyes on your feet. I mean, it's the intensity there. If you agree, it's a big difference from juvenile. It's like nobody's playing around in there anymore, right? Due to the level of, and it's for a reason. It's like there's some like hyper violent people, and then there's like the random dude that got a DUI last weekend. Everybody's mixed together in that first part. You come in and right along, if you remember, on either side of the little footprints where you look down at your feet, on either side they had those ISO cells where there was chains on the floor and these cold metal benches, right? And so like anybody messed up during that time, and usually they would make it a point to make an example of somebody. Somebody in that first walk-in would end up in an ISO cell to kind of set the tone of like, don't challenge the deputies. Don't do this here. But then you do the nuts to butts. You sit on the bench, right? Everybody's like riding a horse together. And then the next, you do little interviews and questions. And the next portion is those windows where you talk to a nurse and they go through, like your history, what you got. You look at your booking photo. You get your colored bracelet because each color means something else. And then right after that is the showers. And that's where it's like, man, life is for real over. Like your civilian clothes are gone. You get your colored uniform, which usually indicates, you're going to CJ, what floor or what tower on that side. And then you have remember that big area where the deputies are in the middle and everybody, and that's just a holding pattern. And it's like, seems like you're there forever just waiting. And everybody's mixed. You got psych patients. You got, we used to call them the ding floors. It's probably not kosher to say that anymore, but dude, those places were wild, man. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they were, man. And yeah, you're right. Waiting there all day. And you walk in, these, you got to see early 90s. This is a little different than now. There's a lot,
Oh, absolutely.
guys in the jails have a lot more, there's a lot more lights been shine on what
Yep.
goes on in not only county jails, but prisons now, where I mean these deputies back then were yoked up dudes, and you get out of line,
No
you're getting
cameras.
you're getting flashlight therapy, whatever it takes. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you get your county blues, and it's funny you mentioned that bench with the chain, because I've been chained up on that bench. You know what I mean? One time I was in the day room, and we were, getting busy with these dudes, and they snatched me out of the day room and they put me on that bench. I must have been on that bench for 12 hours. 12 hours shackled up and just, oh man, miserable, man. And yeah, and then like you said, the ding module, they used to call it the pill module. They put them in yellows, and a lot of guys would fake, that they were dinged out because they were coming down off of heroin and they wanted to go to the pill module to get off of the Malias. You know what I mean?
Oh,
And
yeah.
and then I was always through 9,500. And back then in the county jail, LA County Jail, there was movement. Like you left your cell and went to chow, and they moved everybody. There was a certain point, later on, where they eventually locked the whole entire county jail because there was too much violence.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, man. I mean, the county jail. I saw more violence in the county jail than prison any day.
Oh, for
Um,
sure.
it was, you were in these environments. It was really hostile back then. There was a lot of your racial tensions, with the homeboys and the African Americans, the blacks, and a lot of wars going on. And so you had a moment's notice, had to jump, and if you didn't, then hey, see you later.
Yeah.
So
And that was really driven, just to clarify, the racial categorization was driven by the inmates. It wasn't the deputies would ask, like, who do you roll with? Because you would have people, Asians roll black, and you'd have every once in a while you get a white dude with a Bentley B tattooed on his neck, and he'd be like, I'm going with the blacks, and then Southsiders, but that was driven. That wasn't something that the deputies made. That was like people would tell us, like, no, I'm going here, so. So let's talk now. This is where obviously you had a shift, because originally it was like drug stuff, right? Or an assault case, here or there. But eventually you do catch a serious case and you end up at state level. So what was that case? Why what was your first prison term?
my first prison term was in 1993, and I had started. I always, like I said, I wanted to fit in. I wanted to take it to the next level, and so some of my friends, were big drug dealers, and they were dealing, crank and crystal back then, and I just gravitated into that. And I mean, they were, doing a lot of things with, the guys south of the border, and man, I every part of me wanted that lifestyle. I wanted to be a gangster. I liked the fast money. And all of them had done prison terms, and I was down with it. I'm like, this is it. I'm in. I don't care. And but at the same time, I mean, I came from a decent family. You know what I mean? Like, my dad was a dentist, and I used to get clowned. They're like, "What are you doing out here?" You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm like, "This guy doesn't really care about me." Like, well, yeah, but your dad's still a dentist. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. You know what I mean? Just shut up, man. Come on, and
Yeah.
let's go. And and so yeah, so my first prison term was assault with a great bodily injury, was a firearm, and I started packing guns back then, because of the stuff I was involved in, and the people that I was selling drugs to. We were selling drugs to presidents of biker chapters,
Yeah.
certain gangs and associations out there that you go into some places and dealing with people that will take your life, and that's just how it was. And
Yeah.
you gravitate towards that, and you become
Can
that.
you now? I know that's probably a sensitive topic, but can you talk about that case, or like how that went down?
That's funny. It's so I I drive up to my homeboy's house and from all-nighter, and I pull up to his house and I see this car, and you're kind of a block away, just sitting there in the middle of the street with no lights on. This is like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, oh, no way.
Yeah.
Like, something's going down. And so here this car comes really slow, and I just take out, that's just what we did, I mean, I pull out the piece, and and I light this car up, and then the car, speeds away, and I'm like, whatever. I go inside to tell my, homeboy, and hey, this is what happened. He's like, yeah, whatever. Just, he give me the piece and let's just go to bed, whatever. So all of a sudden I get, they're banging on the door. His sister's like, hey, fool, the cops are out there, man. Come on, man. You got to go out there. I'm like, I ain't going out there. And, that was his mom's house, and I was like, yeah, all right, I go out there. And they cuff me up, throw me in the back, and they say, you're shooting at people, and I go, I ain't doing nothing or whatever. You ain't got nothing. And they're like, yeah, we're gonna search your car, and they find the bullets. They don't find the gun because I left it in my homeboy's pad, and so they take me to jail for ammunition and assault with great bodily injury, and
Had you already caught a felony by that time?
yeah,
So they
yeah,
caught you with like felon in possession of ammunition,
yeah.
which is that
Right.
ad
Yeah.
charge.
Felon in possession of, so
Yeah.
yeah, I was on probation back then, and so they had felon in possession of a firearm. Well, they didn't have the firearm, but they charged me with it, and great bodily injury and ammunition. And so yeah, but the funny story to that is these were neighborhood watch. They ended up they ended up being neighborhood watch, man.
Oh,
You
dude.
know, they were just, kind of, patrolling the neighborhood and
You
trying to
probably
look
put
out.
that guy in a diaper that night, man. He's like, I didn't bargain for this. I'm in the neighborhood watch.
And, I didn't find out till later. And, I never told the homeboys. They're like, hey, man, what happened? And I'm like, man, I'm, nothing, man. Who'd you blast on? I'm like, neighborhood watch. I didn't want to tell them because I got clowned, man. And I was like, I don't want to, I want it to be like cool thing, and they're
Yeah.
clowning me like, what a lame you are, dude. And I'm like, whatever. So anyway, they gave me 3 years for that. And I did about, I don't know, 18, 19 months on that first term. I had an attorney, we had some money, we were doing some things, and so I
Yeah.
had a really good attorney, and I got a good deal.
Are you comfortable talking at any point about like as you came up in that world, like who you were associating with? I mentioned earlier who controls the jails and all of that. I saw some of your pictures. One of those dudes kind of looked like Boxer. I don't think it was, but they are you comfortable explaining to people who maybe don't know like how it is that you cut your teeth, especially when you go to prison, and what it is like, what are the goals for some of these guys? Like, yeah, that's where I want to be, and kind of how that works. Cause I think a lot of people listening probably have no idea, what this part of life is like at all. So is that okay? Are you comfortable talking about that?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. You know, you start, you keep doing time and you going in, and you kind of already get schooled on, the streets before you start going to jail. You start hearing things and how to conduct yourself and behave. And then when you start getting in there and you start learning, what happens, first you identify with who you are, like who you run with. You got I don't know how it is. I only know a little bit of stuff, but you identify as either a Southern Mexican, a Northern Mexican, a black, an other, or there's it's an Asian, or like a Mexican national, which were back
Paisas.
then called the paisas,
Yeah.
and so those are kind of or whites, and those are those are all, how they classify you, because in prison it's segregated and you cell up with those people, because it's racially segregated like that for, because of who controls the prisons. And whether you got, the Southern Mexicans are usually guys that come from a gang or gang association, and that's when you classify. And so when I went in there, I classified as a Southern Mexican, and I, was celled up with, your traditional, Southsiders, or, Sureños. as they called it. I use that as a loose term, because, I'll get into it in a little bit, but to be an actual, sureño means that, you had done some things to actually earn that
You
title.
got to earn it. Yeah. Mhm.
And then, you said you got and those were all controlled, by, organizations that, had started in prison. Where you got the Mexican Mafia, and you got the Aryan Brotherhood, and the Black Guerrilla Family, and then you got the Nuestra Familia. So the Nuestra Familia was the Northern Mexicans, and the Southern Mexicans were the Mexican Mafia, and of course the blacks were the Black Guerrilla Family, and the whites were the Aryan Brotherhood. And so that's just how it was. I mean, it's a lot different now, but back then, that's how it was. And there was rules. There was a guy who, controlled the yard, on direction, from whatever organization was, you were a part of. And you had to follow those rules. You couldn't just do whatever you wanted to do. If you wanted to do something, you had to, run it by somebody. And if it wasn't okay, it's something you just don't get to do. And
So tell us a little bit about, that's what I mentioned earlier, what like casa rules, right? House rules. We used to find those all the time because we'd go in to do raids and find, hooch and, little jail drinks under the toilets and stuff. And we'd find, the casa rules would be written down, so somebody would be running that, we'd have our barman, a rep from inside that would, talk with the deps and let us know. But if it maybe explain to people like what exactly is like casa rules, like, because my understanding is it guides everything. It's like when you wake up and you work out and when you eat and pay your taxes and a portion of your store, like, so, am I off base there, or is that pretty much accurate?
Each place had their own, different guys, set down different, regulars, rules and routines. And, you kind of we had to follow whatever it was. And so different places were different things, but it was pretty much the same. You had to, you couldn't fight another, person of your race without, you just couldn't do that. It showed weakness. It showed, you know, um, that we weren't together. Any conflict had to be brought, to a rep. And so what I mean by a rep is every prison block, say there's 1 through 5 buildings on a yard, there's a rep that runs that building for the main guy. That's called a llavero. He's a key holder
Yeah.
on the yard. So each guy is in control of that building. And so, any type of information would be filtered to this guy. And then, any information from that guy would be filtered to the guy running the yard. And, they had a table, like you said, they had kind of like any structure of anything. They got guys, around the guy running the yard, and, you can't get to this guy without going to this guy. And so you had house rules. You had to get up in the morning, and, you couldn't go anywhere in your chanclas, in your sandals. You can't go walking anywhere in your sandals, because, anything could jump off at any time. You could slip around or fall down or whatever it is. They wanted you to have your shoes on. If you were going anywhere, I don't care if you're going to take to the bathroom or whatever it is, you ain't going from here to there. Like if you were in a dorm or you were in a gym type setting, you're going to go, with your shoes on. And then depending on where you were, if you were in the hole or out on the yard, I mean, you'd roll your mattress up, shoes on at 5 o'clock in the morning, and you got a routine. They're going to give you a routine of exercise. They expect you to be exercising. You're on the yards, it's different than, the hole.
Yeah.
It's a lot less loose on the main line for exercising. But it's definitely encouraged, and they expect you to. They expect you to be ready at all times. Because back then there was a lot of wars going on. It's a lot different now. But all those guys that were controlling all those prisons, they were all locked up in the shoes of Pelican Bay and Corcoran. And so they, all that information had to get filtered to all these different prisons. And let me tell you, it got filtered like you can't believe. I mean, sometimes slowly, but
Yeah.
it got there. And I mean,
It's
You could be at
amazing how they still maintain their organizations from inside. They're just, I mean, that's how the MAs, like, I think a lot of times they'd rather be inside because they're those key holders, you know what I mean? And they're still moving the same amount of money through people's books. It's crazy the amount of laundered, like, millions of dollars, you know, through state prison systems, and it's wild.
Yeah. They, so that's just kind of how it went on the yard, and, you're expected to do that. And, as a young kid, I mean, you hit prison at 19 or 18, 19, like I did. I don't know, when you got these directions and rules, when you really haven't had any as a kid, I mean, it gives you a sense of like, all right,
Yeah.
like, cool, man, I'm going to work out, and I'm going to, somebody's telling me what to do, and I got to follow the rules. It's like, it gives you a sense like a belonging, like no other.
It's almost like being in the military.
Yeah. And it's, and it's like, it makes you feel ultra a part of. And you're like, man, I'm part of this thing that's big. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and now, and you're just connecting with other guys from different neighborhoods. And what I started doing is like, oh man, I could come in here and get better connections and better network of of what I'm going to do when I get out. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I can be a tough guy, I've been to the joint now and meeting all these dudes, and man, I finally arrived, man. Now, I'm somebody. And I mean, this is the greatest lie,
Yeah.
you know, told to, young kids, and that, that to be this way, it's like a sign of, you're somebody. And it's, oh man, it's,
And it
I'm being on
always
the,
ends in destruction. You know, that's the
yeah,
end of the road, as
yeah,
I'm sure you've seen. It's wild.
yeah.
Brandon, I have another question, but do you have anything to pop in there?
Yeah. So you go to prison the first time at 19. You're kind of running with this crew that it doesn't seem like you really have a choice. At some point, you get out. Actually, I have two questions. One, did you continue to kind of run with that crowd when you got out, or did you just go back to not being affiliated with anybody, and kind of what was that like, and did it lead to you getting in the next time? And then secondly, was there ever a time while you were inside that you felt like you had to do something you didn't want to do, and like, not like, mopping the floor or whatever, but like, did you feel like you got an order from somebody where you're like, I really don't want to do this, but I also don't really have a choice? What was that like?
Um, yeah, so when I got out, I didn't want to be different. I'm like, I'm comfortable. Now I have become comfortable this way. And,
Mm.
my dad and them, they always had a place for me to stay, and, they kind of enabled me that way. And, I just continued suit. I just started hanging out with those friends, and whether, somebody would be, locked up or not, I learned that business. I started meeting those connections that they were dealing with, these guys down in Long Beach and south of the border, and I was good at it. Because I had crossed. There's a certain point in that life, and I was raised Catholic. I it was like, go to church on Sunday, catechism, confession, and blah blah blah, and just live like hell all week. I didn't know. I didn't have a conscience, because at some point I crossed the line where anything goes. I don't care. Catch me if you can. And if I go to jail the rest of my life, then that's okay. I'm okay with that. And now looking back at that, and I'm like, man,
Yeah.
yeah, I just continued suit, it could continue the same way. And, it didn't work out too well. I wasn't out very long. And, I picked up, another, a felon in possession of a firearm, by Southgate PD, and I was right back in the joint.
And what were you doing to make money at that time while you were out? Because you got to feed yourself and stuff like that. Were you selling drugs? But were you running with the Mexican mafia? Like, what was sort of like your way to make ends meet at that time?
Yeah, I was selling drugs. I was selling a lot of drugs. And I was just running with, whoever. I was running with my friends and my homeboys, and then, different homeboys from different neighborhoods, because, when you start, you start, selling a lot of drugs, and a lot of, things come with that. And you get a lot of connections and inner workings of different, neighborhoods and gangs. They start rolling with you, because everybody likes money, and, and everybody likes to get high. And so when you're the guy, everybody wants to kick it with you.
Yeah.
And, you start, going to different neighborhoods and rolling with these guys and hanging out in their neighborhoods. And, they got homegirls, and hey, let's party, and just kind of going everywhere. And it's like just one big party. And, we're all on parole, and we all got parole, at large warrants. We've all absconded parole, definitely not for reporting. Like, yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll be there. See you later. And it's just how we did it. We're like, okay, we're gonna go back. I guess it's just a matter of time. We don't know when, but we know it's coming. So we gotta live life to the fullest while we're doing it. And that's what we did. And to the other question, when you were saying that it's something I didn't want to do, I hope I answered that question, the first one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so the second time I um was when I was in the hole, which is called administrative segregation. So when you're in prison, and you do something, whether you fight somebody or you stab somebody, or traffic drugs or whatever, you go to the hole. So like going to jail again. And you get a yellow jumpsuit, and you go to administrative segregation. And so it's like going to court all over again. And then, they charge you, you go into a cell, and then, 30 days later, you'll come to, you got, you got captains and counselors, and they'll say, hey, how do you plead? And I'd say not guilty. And they say, well, you're here for a battery on an inmate. Which is not guilty. Okay, well, come back in another 30 days, and, whatever. So that goes on for months. And so, when I was back there, this is now the serious part of it. This is where, everybody back there is about the business. And you have a certain amount of time to get back. Once you drive up to the hole, they're in pods. So every pod is, the same way as the main line. There's a guy in charge of that pod, and basically runs the whole, who has a direct connection to, the member that is in control of that entire prison. And so, you'll get a kite. You'll have to create a fish line really, really fast. And I mean, you got to get creative. If you don't know about doing that, maybe your cellie, hopefully he does. So you got to make a fish line really quick. So you got to start tearing off the sheets, tearing up your sheet off this roll they give you. And you got to start taking the strands off of those sheets and start making a rope. So, man, I can get into it all day. So you tie it to the front of the door, and you get your cup, and you start, spinning this thing, because you need to make a rope until, the cup, stops, and then you get turn it the other way, start making a rope. So you have a certain amount of time. It's called a 114 lockup order. And back then, I don't know how it is now, the guy running that pod, you had a certain amount of days to get your 114 lockup order and give it to that guy, to let him know why you were back there, if you're a Southsider, because they want to know. They want to know if you're come back there because you're no good, or you've told on somebody, or whatever it is. And so you're on the CO. Hey, he's passing by. I need that 114. And eventually they give it to you. You send it to the guy, and and then you're good. And then you go on the roll call, and they'll call your name out. And sometimes we had to exercise in the cell, and get up in the morning, and buenos dias, and you have to say it back. And it was like this military structure type of thing, and I actually liked it. I actually liked it because
Wow.
it was intense. I excelled at working out and exercising. I was really good. Like I said, I was good in sports. I was good at that. And so I went to the hole the first time and got released back to the main line. Well, I went back to the hole again for something. And So the guy running the hole for the member reaches out to me in a kite, and he says, "Hey, so we went out to these 180 yards out. We all went out 3 days a week. We went out 3 days a week for about 2.5, 3 hours, and it was mandatory. We're not going out there to hang out. We're going out there to exercise. We're going out there to exercise, and we're exercising in formation. We're exercising." It's extreme discipline. You got a guy, calling the up downs. You got a guy with the count, and so we're going out there, and there's no funny business. If you get out of line in those exercises, if we're at like 200 and at 199, you get out of range, what range or whatever it is, we're starting over from zero. It's just
Jeez.
pure discipline, because they require that, anyway. So the guy started, this is how, what I saw, how they start, pulling people into that way of life. So they saw me back there a couple of times. And so this guy reaches out to me and he says, "Hey, I have a favor to ask you." So, I know from back in the days and older homeboys telling me this stuff, never run for the White House. Don't get involved in that type of politics stuff because it never ends well. It's just, hey, do your thing, put in some work, hey, keep those guys close, but never do any of that stuff you don't need to. And so that was always in the back of my mind. And here this guy sends me a kite and says, "Hey, I need a favor for you. Here we go." Right. So he says, I want you to run the exercise yard outside. And I'm like, man, I don't want to get caught up in this. I know, you've heard things, before. And I'm like, man, I don't want any part of this. These guys, now I'm going to be in control of these guys outside. And if something happens, I got to deal with it. And I'm like, no, I don't want to. But you can't just tell these guys no. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I'm like, okay, with all due respect, if you can find somebody else, it would be appreciated. And, and I got to talk to these guys with like ultra respect, like the way I'm right now.
At this point, is this like the first time where you're like, okay, this might be, I might be going to the next level here. And you're kind of like, I don't want to do that. Like,
yes. Yeah. I do not want to do this. And, because it just, like I said, I've heard things and, it just never ends well. They, your own friends turn on you. And so you've just heard stories of guys turning on people for nothing. And so I shoot him the kite back. He shoots the kite back and he's like, "No, I understand." And he goes, "But I would really like you to." And, you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, and I'm, of course I'm talking trash to my cellie and like, come on, man. I want to, anyway. So I say, all right, I appreciate the opportunity, with respect. And I mean, it's ultra respect and okay. So yeah, I go out there, I pick a guy. He has no choice either. When I say, okay, I need you to be, the count guy and, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2, so we got one guy doing this kind of like a cadence, and, and he didn't want to do that either, but he had no choice either. And, so, we're out there doing that. And because I already know there's a bunch of young kids. I'm a little bit older. There's a bunch of young kids that everybody's, got egos and, and different mentalities, and they don't want to do stuff like I'm ordered to do it. And so, sure enough, I don't know how many months later, in these exercises, somebody starts saying stuff during the exercises. And, and you're not supposed to give guys any, warnings.
Right. Because that was a direct challenge to you.
Yes, it's a direct challenge. And it's like, okay. And I knew this was coming. And, and I say, hold your questions till the end, and he did it again. And so now I'm committed. Now I'm like, man, is this really happening? Yes, it is. And if you don't do something about it, your career is over.
Yeah.
And you cross a line where there's no coming back. And
so this guy picked you for whatever reason that may be. Maybe you don't. So that means somebody lost that position, or they're just looking for you to get more involved, or I mean, there's got to be a power struggle there too. Is that the guy that was getting out of line and giving you trouble, or is it somebody completely different? How did that dynamic work?
Well, I think there was a guy that got transferred to a different prison, and so he was out there, running the exercise, yard,
Yeah.
and now it's a lot different. I think years later they started putting guys in cages and all this weird stuff. But back then we were all out there on this like 180, design yard, and we were all in rows and formation, and yeah, so like I said, you have those guys, and so they would call them shoe kickouts. So what they would do is they started, I don't know how they started doing this, but this is probably going to sound out there. They started sending guys that were in the shoe and that, their shoe term was over. So they would send them, there were two different prisons. And so it was a lot of times where there was like stuff going on at prisons that they needed to, handle some stuff. Stuff needed to jump off, and they were sending these like soldier dudes to these prisons to kick stuff off. And so anyway, these guys would leave, and then now there's nobody running the
So you were
exercise.
just the next guy up, sort of.
Yeah, and they see a guy, young kid, he's coming back to the hole, you know what I mean? Like maybe there's potential with this guy. Hey, he seems to, he's gravitating toward this environment, who knows? And this is what I thought, like,
Yeah.
okay, well, and when these guys, tell you that stuff, it's like, man, these guys are directly connected to, the member that is, running the entire prison. So, each member had like a prison, and there was one guy at that time that, had that prison, under his control. And, and so, yeah, I went with it. Same with this guy, mouths off. And, there was another guy out there who, so, when you have to do something to somebody, you have to discipline somebody, you're not going to let them know, and and so the dude had to get disciplined. And unfortunately for me, there's a guy, in a like a gun tower, but it's not a gun tower, it's like a little window, and he's watching the whole time. And he's got he's out a 37 millimeter block gun first. And if you don't continue to get down, then he bring out the mini 14 and he'll shoot you. And so here I am, I have to do this, and I'm getting shot by these 37 millimeter block guns, like pow in the head. And there's a guy out there. This guy has to be disciplined enough, and I have to continue to be shot by these things until that guy tells me it's okay for me to get down. Because the COs are saying, get down. And until this dude out there who, is another guy that's, in connection with these other guys, says, okay, get down now, and feels this guy's been disciplined enough, I got to be getting shot by this thing. And so anyway, my face is looking like Rocky Dennis from Mask, getting all, and so then he tells me to get down. And
Jeez.
So, yeah. And so that's how I had eventually caught the shoe term in the hole, for battery on an inmate while, in, administrative segregation. And so, and unfortunately for that guy, back then, I don't know, like I said, I don't know about now, they didn't take disrespect lightly at all. And I mean, you just didn't do it. So they confined me to quarters until they do an investigation, and the IGI come in and want to do all this or whatever. So I guess they take this guy to another pod. Well, I get a kite from another guy from Inglewood. And, he says, hey homie, he goes, I want to let you know what happened with this dude. And, they lured him out to the yard, and they let him know it was okay for him to come back out to that exercise yard in a different pod. And they took a blade out there, and they, gave him the business. And, yeah, they, and I was like, hey, got nothing to do with that. I just, what do you do? And I feel bad, but hey, that's the world we live in. And, that's how it goes down. And so, yeah, man, I didn't think anything of it. I just, I was like, oh, well, hey, whatever. You shouldn't disrespect it. And that's just the way it goes. And now I look at it, I feel bad for people like that. And, but you couldn't, that wasn't me back then.
Isn't it wild how, you know, that progression, there's a lot of like spiritual darkness. You think back to where we started, you're 14, 15 years old. I want to be there. I want to be cool. I want to fit in, and then skip forward through all that experience. And you get yourself into these positions where you're like, how did I get here? Or like even you doing good, really, all things considered, in the system. But then even you feeling like, man, I don't really want to do this, because you knew it was gonna cost something. You know what I mean? It's funny, just to give you the other side of that, working as a cop, like we always had to deal with the cleanup. You know what I mean? So we would watch little homies on the street as they progress. They'd go off to prison and come back, and they'd come back worse than they were before, because it was like, now I have street cred. Now I have respect. And what they didn't see, I remember going to like drive-bys and stuff where cars would roll into the neighborhood, pop, 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 they would leave. What for them, that's a notch on their belt, like, yeah, we went over there and we lit them up. But what they didn't see was us going in, talking to the mother and telling them your 14-year-old's been shot in the head, listening to the screams and the trauma of the brothers and the sisters and the family members. And, that's from the other side. It's like constantly playing cleanup, right? So it's such a, now I look back and I think, man, the devil has deceived people so much, because you just almost like don't see it until your eyes are opened, until the Lord gives you an eye-opening, whatever. Sometimes it's a circumstance, I'm sure you'll tell us, but like, it's like you don't even see it. You're blinded to the violence and the overdose and the abuse and the just all the, just is so dirty, but when you're in it, it's like, yeah, this is it, man. I'm living it up. Like, so tell us, like, what was it? When did you feel like God was like knocking, like what happened, or was there a circumstance or something? What was it that made you think like, hold on a minute? Like, was there a moment? Maybe it was a series of, over time. I don't know. What was it eventually that caught your attention?
And you're right, man. It is a dark world. I mean, especially, in prisons and stuff. It's seriously dark, and people are being led astray by the enemy, and us that have come out the other side. It is our job to shine light in dark places, no matter what. I call myself part of the no matter what club, no matter what, man. But what happened, I started 2 weeks before I was going to parole from the shoe. So I paroled from the shoe. And so when you parole from the shoe, back then you got a free ride. You didn't have to have anybody come pick you up. Your parole officer had to come pick you up. So they transferred you to, yeah, it's funny, man. So you had to, you would go to the prison of where you were, where your county, so I was LA County, and they shot me to Lancaster prison. So I had to stay, isolated for a week, because I was a guy from the shoe, and they didn't want me on their main line, until my parole officer came to pick me up. And so 2 weeks before I got out, man, I woke up in the shoe, and what was it, 4B, 4 left, or 4B, 1 right? I forget. I have the paperwork, and and I was like, man, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. And that had never happened in my life. I was comfortable doing time, and I was like, I made the decision. I was like, okay, well, I won't sling drugs. I'll just drink. And drinking never worked out for me either, because every time I drank, I got a little crazy,
Yeah.
and doing things. And so I know now that was the Holy Spirit,
Wow.
talking to me and saying, like, I got a different plan for you. You know what I mean? I had no idea what that was. And it took me, until 2007, for that to happen. And yeah, I didn't know. And I was like, okay, I get out, I'll just drink. And and I get out and I get this job, and a friend of like I said, my next door neighbor back then from Downey, it was, his dad, he owned this company, and advertising for, tobacco company, and a lot of different things, and travel all over this country. And man, yeah, and I just got that job 2 weeks after I paroled, and I excelled at it.
What were you doing? What was that job?
Um, it was point of sale outdoor advertising, and the biggest client was RJ Reynolds Tobacco Company, which is the second biggest tobacco company in the United States, Camel and all those blends. And so like I said, in every major market, we had signs. So there was like these framed signs. It's called print ad. And so
Yeah.
it could be, a Camel. Back when they first started, it was Camel Joe. So it was
Yeah.
Camel Joe signs on liquor stores and markets and bodegas and all over the country. And just in these frames, a picture of Camel Joe, with a cigarette, and remember the old pool shark guys with,
Yeah.
and then and then over time it changed. They had people on the pictures, and because of lawsuits and stuff. And they also had, there was different top companies like Verizon and Nestle and state programs. And so, but RJ Reynolds was bread of the butter. And so, yeah, we were an account executive or a national program director, and we'd say, hey, we got this program, RJ Reynolds, you have a contract with RJ Reynolds. We need to put this sign up. Well, we didn't really need to put the sign up, but we're gonna pay you to put this sign up. They're like, oh, you're gonna pay me? So we're doing this all over the country. And when I got off parole, I started traveling, going to, I mean, I didn't even know north, south, east, and west, man. I didn't know how to navigate that. When you give a old
Crazy.
knucklehead,
Yeah.
access to places like New York and an expense account and a credit card, and it's like, man, let's go. I'm a network with people all over the place
That's
now.
amazing you had that opportunity too. That's
Oh yeah, no, it was a blessing. And so I was working around here doing I was I got really good at talking.
mm,
My dad gave me that gift. He was this, you know, charismatic Cuban dude, and he could work a room. He could talk to anybody. And so, when you see that growing up, you're like, yeah, I could do that. I just started doing that too. It's
mm.
it's it's the gift God gave me, uh, where I use for the greeting ministry at Reliance Church, and
Yeah.
it's been the biggest blessing in my life, man.
That's
And so yeah, I
awesome.
started doing that. Um, for a couple of years, and then like I said, I got busted. I was drinking, and I was with a homeboy of mine in Southgate, and we got pulled over, and he said, "Hey, I'm gonna take one of you," and I said, "He's got a family, take me." So I went back for the 90-day violation, and this guy, man, he name was Don, and I considered this guy like my actual dad. Like, the guy gave me a job. I get out of jail, and he says, Brian, you just gotta be a little more careful than most people. And he had a paycheck waiting for me, and he said, "You're gonna do great." And I did. And
Wow.
man, man, this guy, for the first time in my life, I felt like this mentor, this guy who was kind of, they used to take me on their family vacations when I was a kid. Like I said, I never wanted to go home, and I hung out with their family. And man, I mean, here's a kid who's never, experienced anything. I'm going to Squaw Valley and Lake Tahoe and skiing, and I'm going to Oregon and on their family trips. And,
Mm.
and I mean, anyway, so this guy, he believed in me, and, so started sending me to places, kind of maybe to test me or something. I don't know.
Mm.
So they used to send me to the rough parts town and all over the country. I mean, I'd go to, you go to, the Bronx and Harlem, and I go to Baltimore, wherever. I mean, the lower Fifth Ward, and New Orleans back in the days. And it didn't bother me. It's like, hey, whatever. It's just
Yeah.
another hood,
Yeah.
whatever. So, but then I started, going to some really nice towns where there's really just all white people and uppity, like, hey, and getting it done. And they're like, man, this guy can go anywhere. This guy can go to, like, send him wherever. So then I became this like national program director and going by myself, and, making a lot of money, and,
Mm.
but I still just, man, I was drinking and partying and meeting a lot of, women, unfortunately, all over the place. And, because, me and this, son, we had expense accounts and we could kind of, do whatever we wanted to do. I mean, we can go to a really nice, I, he was starting taking me some of these restaurants. I had never been to restaurants like that in my life. I mean, like,
Yeah.
how do you order? I don't know how to order from these places. I'm a bald-headed guy. I got these tattoos on the back of my head, and
Yeah.
I'm like, these are weird people. Hey, man, I picked it up real quick,
Yeah.
man, real quick. I'm like,
You
yeah, I'll
figured
have
it
what
out.
he's having, man. I'm like, oh, steamed asparagus and however he's got it, and smelling the wine. I was playing the part, like, oh yeah, that one, and learning now what wine went with what food, and I picked it up real quick, man, and so I'm going to these places and I'm dropping, man, $1,000 at these places, and I'm not paying for this stuff, and man, I'm living a great life, man,
Yeah.
and but there was something missing, man. It was just something missing. I was drinking. I was still, I wanted, I was still getting loaded. I wanted to. I had got out parole in 2001. Worked in that job. I was still kind of. I still had one foot in the world, and I wanted to be. I want this career was great, but I was still messing around, and I was still had one foot with the homeboys, keeping in contact, and at one point was networking with guys in New York who wanted, connections, south of the border, and just doing that stuff. And I get a call from my dad, of all
Mm.
people. I find out, he gets saved, and is remarried, and he moves out here to Marietta, and he's going to this church called Revival Christian Fellowship, and he calls me, and I don't know, I think it was in New York somewhere. I was getting loaded, or I used to hang out in the South Bronx a lot, man, and I was the Puerto Rican dudes. And he calls me up one night, and he's like, "Hey, man, hey, Jesus loves you." And I'm like, "What?" And I'm like, "Well, what are you talking about,
You're
man? Are
like,
you in
thanks,
the
Dad.
you know what I mean?" Like, because you go to, mass and Catholic service back then.
Yeah.
I went to this church called St. Raymond's in Downey, and you walk in, and Jesus, he's just hanging on a cross. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, that Jesus? And he's like, yeah. He's like,
Mm.
hey, man, when you come back, you can come to my house, and, you can hang out, and we'll go to church. And I'm like, church? And I'm like, I ain't going there. I'm like, oh, there's a bunch of weirdos, people. And this fear thing I talked about, man, it's just I'm always afraid, man.
Mm.
I talk a certain way, and I'm afraid of people. But but the tough guy that have gone through all these lives, and all these guys in prison, they put on that tough guy role. They're just all afraid, as I was, because
Mm.
if you take that away, then you're exposed. So I got to keep you out here, so you won't think I'm afraid, but I'm afraid, you know, and it's crazy, man. And so
Mm.
I was like, I don't know, something said, okay, come back. I go to this church, and man, that was the greatest day of my life.
Wow. And what year was that?
That was 2007. Yeah, 2007. This guy, his name was his pastor at the time. His name was Gary Galbraith,
Mm.
and he did an altar call. I do not remember how I got up out of that chair and went up, but I knew, man. I knew, I knew that all the things that I had sought and found, which had never filled me to the top with drugs and alcohol in the streets and prison and money and women and whatever it was, I knew at that moment that true love had entered my life.
Wow.
And there's I've done it. I mean, I've smoked it. I've injected it. I've been involved in it, in whatever type of thing, and nothing satisfied the way that did. And I knew that this is what I'd been looking for my entire life, and I'd found it. And man, oh my gosh, I was like, this is the answer,
Wow.
you know. And
What
so
was what was that like for you? Like, obviously that's a big change in your life. So what did that look like? And I'm just, I want you to put it out there because, you may have somebody listening that's like, maybe they're in that place and they might be saying, I don't know how to do that. Like, what do I do with all my friends, my homies? Like, that's a big part of that change of scene. Everything has to change. So what was that like for you after walking up there that day?
You know, yeah, everything has to change because, there are times when I was like, well, what happens if I get in trouble? What happens if I need them? What happens if I'm not gonna, can I not pick up the phone and like call somebody for help or whatever? Like, I didn't really understand how that was gonna work. All I knew was that something just happened in me that is for real because I feel something that I've never felt before, and I got to do this. And so I just started going to church, and I'm like, how do I not be a homie? How do I not be? How do I shake that mentality? Like, I mean, I can't all the way shake it. You know what I mean? Like that's who I am. But there was that internal struggle. It's like, no, this is not who you are, and I have better plans for you. And the enemy continued to say, like, it's okay. You can still have one foot over here. It's okay. Don't worry. And that was a big pull on my life. And I'm so thankful to God that He left the 99 to come and find me way back when in 1998 in that cell and said, "No, I got something else for you. I'm going to use what the enemy used for evil for good." And I jumped in. I started going to church Wednesday night. Back then they had a Saturday, Sunday night service. I was going to church all the time. I was jumping in. I was jumping into this recovery ministry called U-Turn for Christ out in at Calvary Chapel, Romaland, and networking with people, and just seeing a whole different side of life, and that people actually cared, about people, and that
Yeah.
that I didn't, like I could actually be myself, and that I go, could I be comfortable, like, because I grew up not trusting anybody. I mean, from the streets and prison, you can't trust anybody. It doesn't matter who they are, and because if I let you in, you're gonna hurt me. You're gonna hurt me, and even as a kid, you grow up with this stuff, and if I let you in, love is something that I don't know. I know I just got it some kind of way. I don't understand it, but people, if I let them in, and I still don't keep them out here with that 5 feet, distance, I got to keep these tattooed teardrops on my face because, man, if they don't know who I am, they're gonna hurt me some kind of way, and I gotta keep them out there, man. No way, man. And I just kind of just went in like that, man.
Mm. Wow. What would you say to somebody, again, it's kind of like what I asked you before when you were a kid, but let's say now you're like halfway through life, and what would you say to somebody that's listening that may be in a similar circumstance? Maybe they're like, maybe they felt that, or they've heard that small, still whisper, but they're not ready. Maybe they're just getting out of that special housing unit, or they're just coming back to the neighborhood and they know they want something different. What would you encourage them with?
Listen to it because it says there is no condemnation. Romans 8:1. Now there's therefore no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. And that is God saying, I have a plan, follow me.
Amen.
And the other stuff that is being told to you is a lie, is from the enemy, and you know, we wake up, and telling somebody you wake up every day and there's this invisible line, and it's called fear. And you can sit on the other side of fear, wondering what your life could be like if you just crossed over because the other side, because God's already waiting with open arms. It says, man, I got these gifts for you. I love you. I'm your father. But you actually have to walk over here. You know what I mean? And that's it. That's a daily battle. And you can do it, and tell that person there are other people out there that feel like you, that have gone through what you've gone through, whether it's an emotional bottom or a prison bottom or a marriage bottom or whatever it may be, that there are other brothers and sisters out there that love you, and you don't have to do it alone.
Absolutely. Good word, man. Good word. Brandon, any closing thoughts here as we wrap this up?
No, I don't think so. I think, I'm glad that we had this conversation. I'm glad that you were open enough. I see you every week, and I just know you as a guy that shakes everybody's hand. But now we know each other, sort of at that next level, and I think that's really cool. So thanks
I
for
got
everything.
something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, I didn't mean to interrupt. So, yeah, I got saved at that church. So in 2018, I started going to, Reliance Church. I jumped into the greeting ministry, and I had some, stuff going on with my kid. Like I said, I had that gift. And, one of my most favorite verses is Psalm 84:10 through 11. It says, uh, better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of God than dwell in the tents of wickedness. And it goes on to say, God is the sun and the shield. He'll give grace and glory. No good thing will he withhold from those who walk uprightly. And when I started opening the door for people at Reliance Church and, dwelling in the tents of wickedness, I mean, it blew my mind that now I could actually, you know, welcome people into the house of God. And,
It's
and
amazing.
I try to do that because, when I had gone to a couple other churches, after revival and, I walked in the door, I tried to take some of my old friends to church, and I walked into these places, you know, and nobody talked to us.
Mm.
We were looking a little, maybe we're looking a little shady or back then or whatever. And, we felt uncomfortable. We already felt uncomfortable going there, And so, man, at Reliance, the greeter, I never, there are people, I don't care what they look like or where they come from. There are people walking in there with stuff. I
Hmm.
mean, you could be perfect looking or whatever. And I never want anybody to feel that they're unwelcome or they're uncomfortable. And I literally, and it's funny you say I shake hands. I literally try, and sometimes I forget names. I just do. I literally try to shake everybody's hand to let them know that this is the place for you. And, there is somebody here that cares about you
Mm.
because, they might be walking in, getting ready to jump off a bridge. I mean, you just never know. And, I don't want to take up too much time, but as a result of that too, the Holy Spirit, started working on me again. And, I wear this shirt, it says Saved by Grace, Celebrate Recovery, man. And,
Yeah.
be coming from the recovery, and I got sober, also, in 2007, off of heroin and a lot of different things. And, so he started putting it on my heart. Because I had heard about Celebrate Recovery and I mentioned it to a pastor. And, and he goes, oh, because, Calvary Chapel Way is like, okay, if you mention something, okay, well, then you're going to do it, right? And
Yeah.
I'm like, no, no. He's like, well, I think you should be the minister here. And I'm like, well, no, I'm just saying it would complete our church. And he's like, well, obviously God's doing something here, and let's meet and pray about it.
Mm.
And so, my brother, Pastor Kyle, I got to tell you, man, when I think about guys like that, I'm not afraid to get choked up, because I know that God, places people in our lives for a reason, and the guy has just been, just like I mean, this brother, this safe space that I can, I mean, I have a true friend. I mean, a brother in Christ, and
Mm.
and he's a pastor, and and man, he's just, you know, I just follow him, what I mean, because he's just, I love the guy, man, and so we start meeting, talking about it, and I call Saddleback Church where Celebrate Recovery came from, and I start figuring out maybe how to, it's going to go or whatever it is, and I still haven't submitted to God yet on this thing. We're just meeting and praying about it, and um, so we come up with a launch date. I got enough information. There's a rep for Riverside County, for Celebrate Recovery in every county in the country, and
Mm.
I reach out to the guy, and start talking to him, and he's like, "Yeah, come to our church in Canyon Lake." And blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing here. Like, how am I going to do this? I'm kind of afraid, because like I said, I'm afraid. I don't know what, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so I finally submitted to this and said, I'm going to do this. And when you submit to God, even though you're afraid, he's like, man, I can use that. I'm gonna,
Yeah,
he says,
absolutely.
as I was with Moses, I will be with you. And I think it was Joshua that was afraid. And I might get that wrong, but so I reach out to this guy. Lo and behold, this Riverside County rep guy, he went to Revival Christian Fellowship back in the day. And then when Pastor Kyle mentioned it to Pastor Ted knew that guy from, counseled him on something in his career because he was a retired sheriff, counseled him about something. And these connections started to form. And I was like, oh, no way. And then, like, nothing happens in God's world by mistake. I know it. And then another church had just closed their doors on their Celebrate Recovery after 10 years. A lady at our church was talking to Pastor Kyle. She was in that ministry. And he goes, yeah, we're getting ready to start a Celebrate Recovery. And she goes, what? She brings all the leaders from that one, show me how to get it going. And we launched the Celebrate Recovery. And, I submitted to God. And then he's like,
That's
all right,
amazing.
I got
Yeah.
you. So, and, yeah, so, he obviously thought I should be the ministry leader of Celebrate Recovery and at Reliance. And it's been great, man. We're seeing people getting healed, marriages restored, and, from hurts, habits, and hangups. And it's not, Celebrate Recovery isn't just drugs and alcohol. I mean, it is, you name it. I mean, anger, bitterness, resentment, PTSD. I mean, anything you can think of, Celebrate Recovery is probably more. I mean, I think drugs and alcohol is just kind of like a quarter of it. I mean, everything else is
Wow.
the majority of Celebrate Recovery. It's amazing. It's a Christ-centered 12-step program.
That's awesome. That's incredible. Just think too, like those last few days at the shoe, like God knew exactly what he wanted. And he planted that little bug in your ear. Like, Brian, I got a plan for you. You know, I say that goes for everybody. That's what's so powerful, I think, about your story and what you're doing now is you can now convey that in a way that someone who's not experienced what you have will never understand it the same way. We could try and you can be on the peripheral and, even me in law enforcement, I have a different perspective. I was in very similar places just on the other side, but no one can take your personal experience from you and how you can now, as a testimony, reach others in those same places. It's a powerful testament to what God can do. He truly does make beauty from ashes, Nothing like it.
Absolutely, man. He's blessed me with a great career. I eventually went to college and got a degree, and I work for the Rancho California Water District as a senior operator at the treatment plant. And I mean, I've had a fantastic career. I've been in that industry for about 15 years, and I'm actually trying to work in what I do for the commissioner position to work with the county, and maybe we can get some internship program going for the kids with these big water districts, so these kids can actually have a career and and just have a chance.
Yeah. I think it's great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing everything that the Lord's going to do, with you and through you, Brian. I think it's really cool. So, yeah, we might have to, next year we should have a recap and check in on Celebrate Recovery and the commissioner position and, yeah, really cool.
Good.
I think that about wraps up our time. We usually close with a little bit of lighthearted questions, which I think we can ask him. Brandon, you think? Or
Yeah, absolutely. What do you mean?
I don't have any written down. Do you have any off the top of your head?
I mean, it's just silly ones like cake or pie. I mean, you have a preference?
We do a lightning round of questions here as we close up to end things a little lighthearted. So yeah, that's usually one of them. First question: do you prefer a piece of cake or a piece of pie?
A piece of cake.
Wow, yeah, that's very interesting. You never know how that's going to go.
Yeah.
I'm not a big sweets guy, but
Yeah.
if I had to do it, I would have a piece of cake.
Okay.
You a morning person, night person?
I'm definitely a morning person.
Yeah, that was probably instilled in you in
Yeah.
in prison, right?
I can't sleep past, I'm up early. I want to sleep longer, but I'm just up. I'm a light sleeper. Yeah, it probably was, early mornings, put your shoes on and roll your mattress up. Stupid.
All right. If you could have your choice to drive any car, right? If somebody was like, you just have it. What would you be driving?
I just want a truck.
Oh, another truck. So this
Dude,
this happens once in a while.
We have a theme on the show. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want a truck. I just want a brand new, like a Chevy Silverado or a GMC or just a truck.
You
Just to
like
cruise.
trucks?
I just want to have a bench seat, and just cruise.
All right. All right. That's a going theme here. Sometimes I'm like, somebody's going to say like Lamborghini or something.
No, it goes to
Several
show the
of our
type of men
guests
that
are
we
just
have.
like, I just want a truck, man. That's
It really goes to show the type of men that we have on the podcast.
Yeah.
There's a theme, and it's a good one.
yeah.
What if I would have said a Prius? Then you would have thought something different.
I would have been like, Jesus still loves you. To each his own, bro. That's good. That's good. Awesome.
man.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on, Brian, and sharing your story. That was really cool. Really, really powerful to see what the Lord can do with. And I like what you said at the end. And we say that often on the show is that Lord's not looking for, superheroes or super talent. He equips you to go, but what he's looking for is a willingness. He's just looking for people to say, here am I, send me. And
That's it.
that's so true. The longer we live, I think we can both attest to, like, we see that more and more, that when we get over ourselves, we can be useful. It's oftentimes ourselves. Like you said early on when you were a kid, like how you were deceiving yourself. It was like our selves get in the way. We think it's for our benefit, but we really just get in our own way. We block what the Lord wants to do because of our pride. That really is the original sin. I think a lot of what we're talking about, whether it's drugs, or alcohol, or other types of trauma dealing with, what ends up being the biggest block is just pride. We just see ourselves as more important than anyone else. And that unwillingness, maybe, like you said, it is driven by fear, but like, really it's pride that says like, I will not let go. I will not be submissive to God or to anyone else in my life. I saw that a lot, in law enforcement. I saw that out on the streets where, we were like legitimately trying to help these young homies and really everybody. And you would look in their eyes, you would see this pride that's like, dude, I am not backing down no matter what. I will fight you. I will stab you. I mean, and we did, I threw down with a lot of people over the years. And it was just this pride that I thought, man, it's really sad because that lack of brokenness, which they're so afraid of, is the last obstacle to true healing, and if we can learn to let it go, and I'm talking to myself too, you have to give it to the Lord every day. And I will, say, I noticed that, and when you're talking about stuff and then you back it up with scripture, that is so important because that is really like, what being a man is really about is spending time in the word, letting God form you in who you are, whatever gaps there were, whether in father figures or in friends or family, God fills that gap. He is our everything. He's our father. He's our friend, and we actively communicate and are filled up on a daily basis by being in his word, and as you are a personal testament to, the word fills every question you possibly have. It's like, you got a question about something, boom, here's a verse. And I often encourage, Brandon and I both, we encourage young fathers, young men in general, on our show, stay in the word. Like you got to start off right because it's so easy to be drawn away again by temptations and by the world. And the Bible says that the word of God is a double-edged sword, right? It's you got to pick up that sword and keep it in your hand, and it sets your mind right for the day. First things first, get in the word, and everything else sort of falls into line. So I noticed that about, some of the stuff you were saying. Kudos to that. That was really neat.
Yeah. That's you said that's our weapon. I mean, that's our offensive weapon is the word of God. It's the same way when the enemy came to, the Lord after the 40 days and he just, said, it is written, and then you're going back to, talking with people that need to spend time in the word, brothers and fathers and sons. I mean, Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, so sharpens the countenance of my friend. And, and I don't know, people think that it's a weakness, to sit together with another brother or another person that might be struggling and like with the Bible and read, because it takes intentional sacrifice and intentional fellowship. We all have an hour to spare somewhere. And, unfortunately, people nowadays, they're not willing to get out of their little, bubble or uncomfortableness and, and reach across the aisle when there are so many people that need the word of God, that need in fellowship like we're doing here. And, and because we break deep, we come together and with these brotherhoods that, we're stronger in the pack.
100%. Yep. We definitely need our battle buddies. That's for sure. It's the way God made us. Well, I appreciate you coming on again. And for everybody listening, check us out on YouTube. The whole show is, if you want to see our faces and Brian's beautiful face here, you can watch on YouTube. That's where it's up. And please subscribe and follow on that. Helps us get the word out there. But of course, we're also on social media, Meta, Facebook, Instagram, and you can listen to the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. That's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Amazon Podcasts. It's all out there. Check us out at definingtruth.org, definingtruth.org. You can get good resources like our book, Defining Truth, Articulating America's Worldview. That's on there. And lastly, you can always watch the show also on the Real Life Network, RLN. Check that out. They have an app that's super cool. Tons of great content, biblical content, conservative content. Real Life Network. You can watch us on there as well. And until next time, keep defining truth.